I would like to welcome Commerce Secretary of India, Mr. Anup Madhavan, who has joined us for giving his keynote address under the India Toy Fair session, which is going as of now. And we are going to talk under a session entitled Scaling Up Toys Export from India. Welcoming Mr. Vadhavan.
I thank you all at the outset for having me on this panel on the crucial subject of scaling up toy exports from India. Before I share my views on toy exports, I would like to thank all visitors, exhibitors, manufacturers, and artisans for teaming up with us for the India Toy Fair and for actively participating in this first ever virtual toy exhibition. India has a long standing tradition of colorful and interesting toys with tremendous variety across the country. The Honorable Prime Minister, in his Mann Ki Baat address on August 30th, 2020, highlighted the huge domestic and export potential of Indian toys and the vast economic opportunities that can be tapped in promoting indigenous toys. India's toy and games industry is set to play a crucial role in realizing these aspirations. All stakeholders need to work together in achieving these goals. India Toy Fair 2021 intends to bring policymakers, toy manufacturers and distributors, investors, industry experts, MSMEs, artisans, startups, children, parents, and teachers together on a common platform in a bid to propel the growth of the Indian toy industry to give it a global competitive edge. I am given to understand that the current size of the Indian toy market is approximately $1 billion and it is expected to grow at a CAGR of 10 to 15%. Toy exports from India are to the tune of $113 million per annum, which are significantly below the potential and the levels achieved by other countries. For example, Vietnam, a much smaller country than us, exports to the tune of $900 million per annum. There is significant export potential from India in the toy sector that remains. To promote exports from India, we need to foster partnerships among domestic producers, exporters, and policymakers, and create an enabling environment for potential exporters to improve productivity and the technological content of our products. The toy industry in India is based on cottage, micro, small, and medium enterprises with about 4,000 manufacturing units, with over 85% being micro units. India is home to several toy clusters and thousands of artisans who produce indigenous toys, which not only have a cultural connect but also help in building life skills and psychomotor skills among children at an early age. We intend to promote such clusters through innovative and creative methods. Clusters lead to efficient supply chain mechanisms for raw materials, parts, and better cost economies for suppliers and manufacturers. Toy manufacturing clusters should be developed by the state governments to attract international players to set up their manufacturing base in India. We can also look at setting up plug and play environments for large, modern toy manufacturing and accessories encompassing the entire supply chain from design houses, model making, tool making, electronics, paint making, packaging, hardware to testing labs to offer large international companies a one-stop site for them. States like Karnataka offer a good example of creating toy clusters to attract global toy makers. Promotion and other states could emulate these examples. Promotion of toy-based tourism, local toy banks or toy libraries also need to be. The government will make all efforts to create a competitive environment, a level playing field against unfair competition from cheap and substandard imports in promoting this endeavor. And the recent quality control order aimed at upholding quality and standards is a step in this direction to ensure that our manufacturers have a level playing field against unfair trade practices exports coming into India. We will look at all options to support our domestic and export industry in the toy sector. To scale up exports, I urge the industry to identify and raise specific issues of ease of doing business impacting toy exports that can be ironed out with the help of the departments concerned in the government. I would also encourage our manufacturers to identify policy, regulatory, and operational impediments they face in setting up their industries and operating their industries, and I assure you all support in resolving these issues in a limited time frame. I thank you once again for giving me this opportunity to share my views, and I conclude by wishing the very best to all participants in this major toy event, and assure you of all support from the Department of Commerce in ensuring that our common goal of promoting Indian toys domestically and globally is achieved in an early time frame. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mohit Bhasin from KPMG. I welcome you to India Toy Fair, one of the most interesting sessions we are currently scheduled for. I have with me an eminent panel led by Mr. Vivek Jhangiani. Vivek is the chair of FICCI Toy Committee and managing partner at United Toys. Along with Vivek, I am joined by a prominent officer, Mr. Gaurav Gupta. Mr. Gupta is the Principal Secretary, Commerce and Industries Department, Government of Karnataka. Along with Mr. Gupta, I have Mr. Sanjeev Kolar, Managing Director and India and Southeast Asia of Hasbro India Sourcing and Operation LLP. So we are going to be discussing about a very interesting subject, which is of scaling up toys export from India. And as you know, we all are right now in the middle of India Toy Fair, which is going on. And we witness participation of multiple stakeholders, right from business delegate to students to children to exporters, educators, and many more, which is one of the very unique kind of an event we are currently witnessing. I just would like to spend maybe 1 minute in talking about some numbers, the potential with the sector practically unfold. So toy sector in India has been recognized as one of the champion sector by government of India. And sector is going to be a great focus by government across multiple streams, right from making us indigenous, talking about the entire value chain creation, talking about incentives and benefits which will help the sector to grow. So in terms of numbers, as we see currently, Indian toy industry stands close to $1.5 billion, out of which we are talking about close to 240 million are value of export which India does. So we are talking about close to 340 million worth of goods getting exported from India, and we are talking about close to 370 million kind of exports, which is imports, which is coming into India. There's a tremendous potential we foresee in the sector to unfold. Currently, the sector is spread more in the form of an unorganized segment, then further complemented by the SME segment, and then we have some prominent global and Indian brands who are driving this sector. It is about to unfold, and that's why we are talking about the most interesting subject about the potential of exports from India. So with this, I take the opportunity of inviting my co-panelist, Vivek Jhangiani. Vivek, I would like to draw your thoughts and help us to understand that how do you see this sector shaping up and how India, as of now, can get ourselves ready when it comes to exports from India?
So good morning, everyone, my esteemed panelists and Mohit. Mohit, I think you were right in what you said, that India is really poised for growth within the toy sector. And as of now, our timing could not be better, that the thrust that the government is actually putting on toy exports at this point is just timely, because a lot of, post-COVID, we've had a situation where a lot of companies around the world who realized that their manufacturing was done in one basket, which was primarily China. And that got affected and due to the whole COVID situation. And they realized that they really need to now look at other geographic locations for doing their manufacturing. What has transpired is that companies from the US, Europe, around the world have already moved from China to maybe China operated factories in Vietnam or certain other countries. And that's something we can get back to later because that's a model that we could learn from. But if you look at that sequence, India is really very well placed. Our infrastructure is there. We have one of the finest legal systems. And in terms of the whole banking and the finance sector, it's a well-settled economy. And toys has never really been looked at seriously by anyone within this country. It's really hats off to companies such as Hasbro and all who saw the potential earlier and have been investing in this country and looking at setting up scaled factories. Most of us who are in the toy sector have traditionally been, MSME units, creating our own brand. But with this mindset change, a lot of us can now scale up. The potential is there to be able to export to, almost an $80 billion market. Today, India is what? We had about $150 million to $200 million of exports, which is really minuscule. China dominates with $58 billion worth of toy exports. So I think, Mohit, to answer your question, I think the potential's there. We have skilled labor, we have the infrastructure, and it's showing through in certain areas where, for example, Mr. Gupta from Karnataka, they've set up an amazing toy export zone out of Koppal. There's a lot of thought going into all of this, Mohit. And I really think that India is poised to be able to take over and supply more and more toys to the rest of the world.
Thank you, Mr. Jangiani. I think you made a very interesting point talking about numbers from 150 million exports to maybe 80 billion, which is definitely going to create a lot of excitement in the mind of the business community. I would like to move to Mr. Gupta. Mr. Gupta, the potential is unlimited, and this is a sector which is just going to bloom as we see. And I know Karnataka is doing a lot more. Could you please enlighten us in terms of your approach, that how state government is offering the playground for the players to come and manufacture, and not only manufacture but export?
So hello everybody, and indeed thanks Mohit and thanks Vivek. Indeed it's a very important sector, and much before the Honorable Prime Minister took it onto himself through his Mann Ki Baat in August 2020, Karnataka 2 years back identified this as a very important segment. You see, we were looking at from the point of view of how we can have employment and the production clusters. So we identified 9 such clusters based on various economic activities, and one of them was toys cluster. And this toys cluster, we interacted with the entrepreneurs from abroad and from the state, and identified Koppal as the place which is relatively in a less industrialized region of the state. But more importantly, I think we need to emphasize on few points, and which I would like to say upfront. One is it has a very high employment generation potential. And that is the reason why we should promote it as a contract manufacturing center, as a global sourcing hub. And I'm sure that FICCI is taking up phenomenal work. I'm also proud of the work which is being taken up by the FICCI Toys Committee under the leadership of Vivek and others. And we all know that Hasbro has been working at it, along with others like Mattel and Fun School and others have been looking at the global toys market. India is a minuscule player in that. And there is a huge potential, particularly, as I said, for employment generation. we no doubt have a very rich legacy of toy making, but toy making has been more in the handicraft sector. It has more in terms of small units which are disorganized. They are not really able to scale up further. And what needs to be done is how we can have market linkages so that we can link up the small and small artisans and other small industries to the global requirements. And what we have done in Karnataka is looking at this toys cluster, which will be manufacturing initially the injection molding kind of toys, but also later on into dolls, into plush toys, into number of other things, etc. And we are looking at scale. We are looking at how this can become the largest toys cluster in perhaps India, definitely, because it's a dedicated toys cluster. And we envisage almost 4,000 crores of investment and also at least 20,000 of employment generation in a matter of just 1 or 2 years. So the inauguration of this, the foundation stone laying of this has been already done by the Chief Minister, and we look forward to the Honorable Prime Minister in perhaps in the next 2 or 3 quarters lay the to inaugurate the cluster, which will be one of its kind in the entire India.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gupta. I think you made a very important point about the potential this sector particularly unfold, and I totally concur with you. Having worked in this sector from the DPIT as well, this is a high employment generation sector, and especially your line of thinking that we can become a global manufacturing hub. Contract manufacturing aspect could be an interesting element. So I take this opportunity to now draw attention from Mr. Khuller. Mr. Khuller, you are the global leader in this space, and who can better answer this question of India becoming the global manufacturing sourcing hub? So, what are your thoughts in this direction, and what are your plans for India?
Yeah, thank you, Mohit, Vivek, and Mr. Gupta for the background. And I think it's quite appropriate. And thanks for mentioning that, Vivek, about Hasbro's role also in building up India as a source for global manufacturing for toys. Hasbro really started this journey in India about 5 years ago with the specific objective of developing a manufacturing base for exports as part of its global sourcing and manufacturing strategy. And Hasbro worked with established manufacturers who had good manufacturing capability in allied industries like plastics, for example, right, and help them to kind of understand and appreciate the requirements of the toys industry. So we've been on a journey over the last 5 years to bring up the capability in the total manufacturing ecosystem in India, not only just working with our manufacturing partners, but also developing a supply base of critical raw materials and other materials which go into making toys up to a global safety and quality standard. So that has been a fairly interesting journey, and we've been successful, in fact, in kind of setting up the base in India, and in fact growing to a position where we are now the largest exporter of toys from India. So we are very excited and convinced about the potential for growth of exports of toys from India. And of course, there'll be various challenges to be overcome, but I think the basic potential exists in India, and we can talk more about the challenges as we go along. But it is also very, very encouraging to see some of the initiatives which are being taken. Particularly like to call out the initiative taken by Karnataka for setting up the toy cluster and the special economic zone, which can really help to build a competitive base. Side by side, I would also like to call out that it is important for us to also ensure the other MSMEs who are in the toy sector, who are already exporting through various export-oriented units, who also provide very significant potential for growth and rapid growth for toys exports. We need to ensure that they are also supported and remain competitive.
Thank you, Mr. Kula. Frankly, I was not aware about you being the largest exporter of toys from India. So you are anyhow helping India to feel proud about from the export perspective. And I firmly believe that this is bound to grow now, especially because when things are all falling in place. I would like to go back to Vivek. Vivek, from your role as the chair of FICCI Toy Committee, you have seen multiple discussions. You must have had multiple discussions, engage with various kind of stakeholders, ranging from government, central government to state government to private sector to SMEs. How do you see the policy framework evolving when it comes to India enabling exports for toy sector?
Good question, Mohit. It's actually been a very busy year. Ever since, as Mr. Gupta said, ever since even before our Honorable Prime Minister mentioned in his Mann Ki Baat about toys from India. There has been, the first positive step that we can see is the reaction by the government itself to realize the potential of toys as a sector. We have always touted that it's a sunrise industry, can be the next software industry, can generate employment. All of this has been talked about, but we've never really been able to walk the talk, as as the saying goes. It has been very busy. There have been multiple policy changes, both from the domestic perspective and which also will lead to a positive effect on the export business. Of course, when you create new policy, there are always going to be challenges more. It's not always going to be a smooth road. For a lot of us, as Sanjeev touched upon, a lot of us are in the MSME sector. For this whole mindset change of actually moving from small scale manufacturing to large scale manufacturing is really a mindset. And fortunately, with some of the policies coming in, maybe more and more MSMEs will become large scale manufacturers. But it is a rocky road. I mean, we have to walk a path where there will be some pain. But as I said, it's great that the government has really looked at it. And I think some of the challenges we face more is, of course, some of these challenges are I mean, just for me to step back a bit, as Sanjeev will let you know, manufacturing toys is probably one of the most difficult products to make. I'll tell you, aerospace engineering parts are probably easier than making toys. You have to provide design, innovation, quality, and all of this rolled into a particular price point, especially if you're delivering at the domestic market or for contract manufacturing internationally. It's not an easy thing to do. You may look at a toy or you say, what's in this toy? What is so great about it? But the fact that you bring out play value within the child and you satisfy the parents' needs in terms of the price points is a huge check mark in the box. So we have to understand first that this is not just some handicraft toy that is being made. Today, toys are sophisticated and have to keep innovating to change with our changing children. I mean, we all know that India has the youngest population in the world. We have over 300 million odd children between the age group of 0 to 14. So not only are we looking at export as a market, but that can also transfer into the domestic market. And I think scaling up will also help in arriving at price points where we can do a social need in terms of, ours is a poor country at the end of the day. Not every child can afford a fancy toy. So I think going back to the export sector, I think that's where the change will come in. If we can all scale up and be able to create products at a reasonable price point, deliver on quality and innovation, it's a win-win for all of us. But there are challenges which, I'm happy to chat with you about, because, we are, for example, quite it's turning out to be more of a seasonal business. So therefore, when we look at, I'm sure every industry goes through this, we talk about the challenges faced in labor laws. They scattered, it's all over in terms of individual states, central government policies. We're glad that the government is looking at a uniform code. So, like that, there are multiple challenges. But what I think the policy making of the government could take into account is what I mentioned earlier, is the success story of Vietnam. Okay, their exports 4 to 5 years ago were lower than India's exports. Today they've crossed over $1 billion, and I think that's a huge jump. Okay, a lot of that came through Chinese factories moving to Vietnam, but they were investment friendly. And whether we like it or not, China is the market leader. We can only learn from them in terms of toys, in terms of the technology of manufacturing toys and being able to help MSMEs to be able to scale up with that technology. They've gone through this learning cycle. We should be able to take what they have learned and use it to our good. There are lots of these kind of challenges, and happy to chat with you about that further. But the Vietnam model is a great model to look at, where there is technology maybe coming in from the Chinese and Indian entrepreneurs, taking that technology and actually bettering it. So it's we don't have this long life cycle of learning, which actually can set us back. And of course, there are other points, but I think the government is in the right direction in terms of its policy making. They are looking at even the pain points of going down into the smaller areas, as we call it. But it's a road ahead of us, for all of us to come together and achieve what we are setting out to do.
I couldn't agree more. This sophisticated tool, what we are giving to our young ones, the most loved ones in our families, and in case in very young age, we make them chew, touch, and then feel and play, and leave them alone with these so-called sophisticated gadgets or toys. That sometimes does not look that significant as the way you are articulating, and I am totally with you in terms of numbers. To show some very basic numbers, while our market is sitting at 1.5 billion and China at the same time is sitting at 90 billion. So it's not about competing, it's about learning and then picking from there. How do we really build it? Can you just show some light on what are the 2-3 lessons we can learn possibly from Vietnam? As you just said, one, our entrepreneurs can work back with Chinese players and then build capabilities here. Or what are the 2-3 suggestions you have for the government here, Vivek?
So if you really look at any industry that grows, there are always market leaders that come in and invest in the country. If we can, when you look at the Vietnam model, and you can attract some of the larger Chinese players, and more than just the contract manufacturers, we could look at the auxiliary units, that supply to ancillary units, sorry, that supply to the main toy manufacturers. That creating of that ecosystem is going to be very important, Mohit. As a toy manufacturer, if I were to just break out a simple thing like a toy car, most toy manufacturers will create a design of the car, but everything else is bought from other manufacturers, such as the axles, the tires. You may want a movement to make your car move, whether it's a remote control, electronic gadget. So I think if we can bring those kind of factories to India, which support the main manufacturer, it's a win-win. In the meantime, I think what the government should look at is a phased manufacturing program of such critical components, as we call them. So when we talk about electronic parts, we talk about certain non-toxic paints, we talk about various critical components that go into what I termed a very sophisticated manufacturing product. We really need those critical parts, and without those, we will never be able to compete with China on an equal footing. So these are areas that Mohit, that we should start looking at.
Thank you so much. I think, Mr. Jangani, that's very helpful. As we all know that this whole sector story started with the Prime Minister's Man Ki Baat, and then we had multiple series of activities coming outside of government, like the National Toy Action Plan, which was designed by DPIIT. And then multiple forums have been created, and the very first forum we are getting into is the Toy Fair, which will fill up. And states such as Karnataka is currently leading that charter of developing the whole ecosystem. So Mr. Gupta, I would just like to come back to you. to understand that the toy cluster, what you just mentioned about Copal, is already drawing a lot of attention in the national and international market. Can you just articulate and help us understand that what are the benefits which are being provided to the exporters and manufacturers in the cluster, so that the audience who are listening to us can possibly discuss with you, and you can help them to set up their base in Copal. Mr. Gupta.
I would thank you so much. I think Vivek pointed out to a lot of issues. I have noted down a number of them, and I'm so happy that these issues need to be addressed. We need to have a cluster which takes care of all the requirements. It may be I happened to visit a facility near Guangzhou of metal, and lot many people were there employed in design as compared to manufacturing, and lot of people were there in packaging and such other or assembly. So the kind of jobs that are likely to arise here are humongous. But we need to see that we are in the part of the global supply chain. And in Karnataka, we have had tremendous experience of being a part of the global supply chain, whether it is IT, for which Bangalore and Karnataka is known, but more than that, it is also parts and components and aggregates and assemblies which we take it up in respect of aerospace. Vivek talked about aerospace engineering and aerospace parts being simpler as compared to cars or sorry, toys. So I understand that, and but being a part of the global supply chain is very, very, very important. We have to think global. And I'll cite an example of that, how we do it in Karnataka. Like, for example, in the Valentine's Day program, which was organized some time back, there were 800 tons of roses that were shipped from Bangalore to Amsterdam one day before the Valentine's Day. Now, this calls for a large, supply chain, which goes into the issue of production, certification, and then dispatch and such other things. Airbus, for example, sources almost $500 million from Karnataka for aerospace parts. I'm talking only about parts, components, assemblies, and aggregates. So now these are things on which we have been working at. And we understand we have another agriculture commodity, gherkins, on which again almost 1,500 crores of gherkins being exported from Karnataka to Europe. Now we understand the issue of what it requires. So that is the reason why we have made a cluster in which there can be different entities that can be there. It is an integrated manufacturing facility. There will be common facility center. There will be quality testing, certification centers, research and development, and such others which are required for the toys manufacturing sector. And we understand that toys will be different. As Vivek mentioned, there will be somebody producing wheels and motors, somebody will be producing axles, somebody will be making the painting and things like that. So we want all of them to be there at short distance from each other, and that's how it works. So if you have lead time, which is 1 hour away from each other, and what we have identified is not just a single location of say 100 acres or something. We have identified a district. We have identified a district in which you can have employment of almost 1 lakh people is what we ultimately plan it to be. And talking about another issue which Vivek mentioned, very important for this, toys is a seasonal market. We require great labor flexibility. We will need to have people who are taken on fixed term contract basis. They call it fixed term employment. And this has now been facilitated as a part of the general labor reforms. But even preceding that, the government of Karnataka had taken on itself not only to provide incentivization for the cluster, but also to give non-fiscal measures, which included labor flexibility. So you can have women who are working, and let me tell you, a lot of women will be employed here. So we will have women working, we will have women working at night shifts, we will have people who are working for 4 to 6 months a year. We know that the demand for toys is more in October to December kind of requirement. So therefore, you need to work 6 months prior to that, 4 to 6 months. I'm sure that Sanjeev and others would know exactly what is it is. We are proud of Hasbro being associated with the toys cluster as well. And we understand that it requires ease of doing business. It requires faster, cycle times for setting up business and for production times, etc. And all of this is being facilitated. Ready to build facility will be available for people who would like to move it into the cluster. You can just hire a space off the shelf and start production. So these are some of the things that we are working at. And let me tell you, Karnataka is the best in terms of design. We are the research and innovation capital of the country. And if you are looking at innovative toys design, I'm told that each one of these global contract manufacturers will be trying out more than 7,000, 10,000 new designs every year. And a lot of work, painstaking work goes on that. So that also is a very important thing. We are working with the National Institute of Design and a number of other players to make this happen. That design itself is a very important part of it, and then also production, logistics, and others. So we are proud that we are working with the industry captains, and let it not be just it's not for Karnataka. We are making a global facility for India. And we need to ensure that if we have 1.5 billion in terms of toys production, we need to be much, much, much larger and close to China, which is 90 billion. So there's a lot of bridge to be done. It is not one state competing vis-a-vis the other. It's absolutely not. We never look at us competing vis-a-vis other states. We have to compete with the world. And Vietnam, yes, Vietnam is good. Vietnam is very good. We know of Chinese people who have been investing there. Unfortunate part is Vietnam will get saturated very fast. Vietnam, the size of the economy, the size of the population is small. Just to compare, Karnataka's size of the economy is of the same size as Vietnam's economy, and the number of people also is similar. So per capita income wise, we are similar. So we would like to stress that yes, Vietnam is a good model, but Vietnam is getting saturated. A lot of Chinese companies. I have very good friends in Hong Kong or in other places in the world, and it's the Chinese people, it's the Taiwanese people who are setting up factories there. We also have Chinese manufacturers who will be there as a part of joint venture companies that will be set up in the Coppel Toys cluster. What is important is that we look at a global vision and make it succeed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gupta. That's quite impressive. I would, on a lighter note, call it as a pitch to the business delegates who are attending the session right now. And this will definitely create a lot more leads for you as we finish up this sessions. And it goes without saying that Mr. Khuller will now commit more towards India/Karnataka now in the days to come. Let me move to Mr. Khuller now. Mr. Khuller, how do you see this beautiful model what Karnataka is creating? I can call it as in a true spirit plug and play model of manufacturing, supplying the global value chain. How do you see we can create more models like this in India? And you have been seeing this across the globe. So what are the learnings for us as a country, Mr. Khuller?
Yeah, thanks. And I think it was really very impressive to see Mr. Gupta's insights and understanding about the industry. I think he's covered a lot of points which are really critical to enabling the growth of the toys manufacturing in India. And whether you do it as a special economic zone or whether you do it otherwise, but all those ingredients are definitely very, very valid. Those are critical. And in fact, I would just like to expand on one of the capabilities which he covered in his explanation, which was about the design and the development part of it. I think that is a pretty important element which we need to capture also within our India toys operations. The toy industry sees a lot of rapid turnover of products. It has to create a lot of excitement with the toys being kind of renewed almost every year or every season. And over there, the speed to market is very important. And over there, having a robust design and development ecosystem in India so that we do not lose time in translation or bringing in the inputs at those critical stages into India. That's very important. So that's where it was very heartening to see his focus on building the design kind of ecosystem also in Karnataka. And that's something which other locations, wherever we are planning initiatives or toy clusters, should also emulate. Also very important to have support that with a good environment for tooling operations, customized to the design, customized to the toy industry. That is a very important enabler, and what the government also and every government needs to think about is how can the tooling industry specific to the toys industry requirements be supported better. There is a lot of tooling which potentially can be transferred to India, which is used tooling, but is critical for expanding the manufacturing operations in India. We need to see how rapidly that can come into the country and seamlessly without any delays at customs, because every day, every week is very important. We also need to see how we can encourage the competitiveness of the tooling industry in India, as currently, even for export manufacture, there are some structural tax-related disadvantages which the industry suffers from in India versus bringing in the tooling from overseas via import. So I think the design and development part, apart from the fact that yes, manufacturing ecosystem needs to be there, the suppliers need to be there, the ancillary units need to be there. But I think it's worth focusing and having a strong emphasis on the design and development ecosystem also.
But just to add to what Sanjeev is saying, look, it's not, and Mr. Gupta touched upon, of course, a very important aspect, because what does set us back is the innovation and design. It's not like we don't have the capability for innovating or design or tool making capacities. Yes, there are tax issues which make us a little, but I think we have never used those capacities or capabilities for toy design, for toy tool making, specific to that. So those are skill sets we really need to learn. Just to add to what Sanjeev's saying, these are all critical parts, and we do have the capability. It's just about it being focused towards toys.
Absolutely. And maybe just to add to this, I think we also need to look at the creative industry of India also, what Disney has done to the US when it comes to those creating those unique characters and then building the toy ecosystem around that is something what we really need to fill up. India does have, but it has just started maybe 3-4 years back, but a significant momentum to be created for unleashing the creative industry, those animations, those characters, hence building our very own proprietary characters which are widely accepted by our children here, and then the market can be brought in. So I am cognizant of the time. I would just like to keep the floor open. Any further thoughts from Mr. Jangiani, Mr. Gupta, Mr. Kuller?
If I can step in a little bit on two issues which I think both industry veterans have pointed out. Design is a very, very important aspect. One. Number two is they talked about tooling. And let me tell you that Karnataka is also, beside toys and others, aerospace and others, we are also the machine tools capital, and we have people who are doing a lot of precision manufacturing and the tooling required for various automobile and aerospace components, and that can be put absolutely together on that. So we can give a finished product which is required by the global market. And as regards other issues, we look forward to learning from the industry. We know that this has a very, very important role to play. We understand it is not, when we are doing so, we are not doing for the state. We are not trying to make the state shine at all. We are talking about India. And I think it's just like, other states in US may try to emulate the Silicon Valley or California, but they can never become California. And so therefore we have to capitalize on the strengths of every state. And so when we do so, let us not be, talking as though it is the South or the one state or a location benefiting. We have to see how India benefits from that. And that is the critical part that I would like to impress on people, that we are looking on it absolutely on a global level. And we invite Vivek and Sanjeev also to make contributions so as to make this India vision a success in the toys cluster that we are proposing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gupta. Any last comments from our panel members?
So just to add, Mohit, when we talked about policy, and I think Sanjeev touched upon it, and Mr. Gupta also touched upon it in terms of the capability. Sanjeev touched upon it. I mean, these are one of the small changes we can make in terms of tooling that makes, today when you make a tool in India, you have to pay 18% GST. That tax does not come in as a rebate because it's not an actual product. You're not reselling a tool. You use the tool in your manufacturing facility. Sanjeev, maybe you can elaborate a little more on a couple of these points so that, when we do get back into the policy making changes, it would be interesting to make these minute changes so that we become more competitive. Sanjeev, I'd like you, maybe you can take over on that point.
Yes, Vivek, you covered it very well. Basically, when we make toys for exports, and then when exporter needs to buy tooling from India, because the tooling as such is not physically leaving the borders of the country, there is a requirement to pay the 18% GST, which cannot be taken as a refund. On the other hand, if the exporter were to bring in the tooling from overseas, that does not invite GST payment. So that becomes a structural cost disadvantage and a barrier for us to really promote the manufacture of tooling specific to the toys industry in India. So these are some of those aspects. And I also, for example, mentioned that there may be a lot of used tooling also, because tooling is expensive, but there's a lot of manufacturing capacity associated with that. And that used tooling is there in the traditional manufacturing locations from where it can come into India, and we can refurbish and really accelerate our growth. But there also we need to understand how that can come into the country in a very efficient, fast-track manner. There needs to be some policy over there that for the toys industry, the tooling can come in seamlessly, and we can convert that into a finished product very rapidly. These are some of the areas where if we were to promote and support the growth of the tooling ecosystem in India, I think that could support the toy industry to a great extent.
So Mohit, just to add to that, FICCI Toy Steering Committee, and including the manufacturers that we represent, we're all looking at these changes. And I know, Mohit, you've also been involved in the Scale Committee report that we are creating. I think these are all very important inputs, and it's heartening to see the state government of Karnataka mentioning these kind of issues. And therefore that's the change that I was talking about. It's about the government actually recognizing this as an industry, looking at the problems, and what is even more brings a big smile to my face, that we're not talking about state politics here. We're not talking about Karnataka saying we can do this. It's about saying we can all do this together in India, and we can compete with the rest of the world. So I think this is a lovely feeling that you get as an industry member, having been in the industry for over 25 years. Today, I think, is probably one of the most heartening days in this last few weeks, because you started out with that question, and I think all of these thought processes, policy changes, these are things that are now intellectually being debated and are actually coming out to the forefront, and it's really, really good news for the toy industry.
So Vivek, frankly, you wrapped it up so well that I have nothing more to add in terms of the moderator as a wrap-up role I have yet to play. But I think with this, I thank each of you for your great inputs, and I'm definitely sure that the viewers who are attending the session as of now will learn from us a lot, and will also plan to go further in their plan in terms of doing business with India, whether it is about manufacturing or about exporting from India. And I would take this opportunity to thank each of you once again. With this, maybe we can close the session now.
Thank you all.